I think a lot of times people are waiting for permission to
Yes.
finally be the person they want to be. And I think
I
that
wanted somebody to tell me it's okay, Michelle, but nobody's going to tell you that. You gotta figure it out yourself.
all right, everyone, welcome to another episode of High Stakes with Steve Rozenberg. Luckily, I get the great fortune of getting to talk to some pretty cool people. The one thing I've learned from 30 years of being an international airline pilot is that I love the fact that I can pop in and out of a city or in and out of a country, and I can just be a fly on the wall. And a lot of times when you sit down and whether you're having coffee in Germany or a beer in Sydney, Australia, and talking to someone, you realize that that person that you talk to, they've got a past, they've got a present. And listen, I think we all have a future that we don't know yet. But I just sit there sometimes, and as I walk and watch the world go by me, I just think, wow, every single person has a story to tell. We just never ask that person about the story of their life. So selfishly, the reason I do this show is I just enjoy talking to people. I think it's awesome. I think, we have 2 ears, 1 mouth, and sometimes we should use them proportionally. We don't always, but I think we should. And I just really enjoy getting to know people. So we've got an amazing guest today, Miss MichelleJohnston, just my neighbor over in New Orleans. Good to see you, Michelle. Thanks for being on.
Oh, thanks for having me, Steve. I didn't realize I saw you as a podcast host and didn't realize you were an international pilot. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've been flying a Boeing 777 for almost 30 years,
Wow.
all over the world. I've been to every continent except Antarctica. I've been to almost every major city in the world. I've done almost the longest flight ever, which is 17 and a half hours nonstop, Houston to Sydney, Australia. I've done a lot of stuff. Some smart, some not so smart, but I've done them. We'll just say
Well,
that.
thank you for keeping us safe in the skies. Thank you, Steve.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So, Michelle, why don't we just get a quick, I'll use a pun here, a quick flyby of who you are and what you do. And then we can kind of dig into Michelle herself.
Oh, I love that. Yes, I'm a leadership professor at Loyola University, New Orleans, and love teaching leadership to my students. I've been there for over 25 years. And more recently, I started writing books on the importance of connection. And so I'm on my speaking tour right now, talking to lots of audiences, and I'm on lots of podcasts spreading the message that we have to go deeper with connection, which is why I was so excited to be on your podcast, because that's what you do with your guests. You go deeper with connection.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Now, let me just ask you, we talk about your accolades, all your successes, all the trophies on the wall, but if you didn't have your resume and you didn't have those things, what would you say you really are as a person? Like, who are you without those?
Yeah, I am a super curious person who, like you, I love getting to know people's stories. And I didn't realize, as you just articulated it, that so few people actually ask people, like, what's your story? What's your journey? Tell me about you. Tell me about your childhood. What makes you different? And I think that I became that person because my dad, we moved around every 2 years. So rather than being a military brat, we were corporate brats, as it was known back then. And he worked for General Motors, and he held on so tightly. He spent his whole career there and retired. He's 80 years old and happy and healthy, and he's my best friend. And I learned so much from him as a result of watching him lead really, really well. And back then in corporate America, when you led really well, they would not give you a promotion of the same people that you were peers with. They gave you a promotion to a new market and new challenges and new people to lead. So I every 2 years, I went from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, Maryland, to Memphis, to New York, to Detroit, to Nashville, to Tampa, to Birmingham, to Atlanta, Asheville, and then they finally retired in South Carolina. So I got to meet so many different people and learn their stories. And I realized, and it's a bit cliche, but boy, is it true, Steve, that when I would go to a new city, whether I was 8 years old or 13 years old, and you'd see kind of the power dynamics on the playground and kind of the fighting and the jostling. And then you'd see, what was cool in Nashville as opposed to what was cool to wear in Detroit, very different, right? But at the end of the day, we're all frickin' the same. We're all humans who just really want to be seen and heard and valued and loved and appreciated. And so I think I got really good at fitting in and figuring people out.
So it's very interesting. Some of the things you said, I want to kind of back up a little bit. Myself, being a pilot I started flying in 1992 for a company called TWA that doesn't exist
Oh, of
anymore.
course. Yeah. They actually had a big, did they have a plane? Anyhow, yes, I remember TWA.
Yeah. And so I basically lived out of a roller bag and in and out of hotels for the last 30 plus years. Right. So let me ask you this, with you doing a lot of traveling, obviously more than the average, we'll say, of bouncing from city to city, residence to residence. Was there a time that like maybe you had an identity shift of realizing you weren't the average person and you didn't live the average life, and maybe there was some shifts that you had to do as a person to start realizing that maybe you don't get the average, the lifetime friends of being able to grow up with your neighbor and that stuff? Any of those challenges as you grew up?
Yeah, I just got off the telephone with one of my high school girlfriends. I'll never forget. I started in ninth grade in Detroit, Michigan, or Rochester Hills, a suburb of Detroit. And then 10th grade, we moved to Hendersonville, Tennessee, a suburb of Nashville. And then 11th grade, we moved to Tampa, Florida. And then as soon as I graduated, we moved again. And so I didn't get the opportunity to stay in a place where I could go back on holidays to be with my high school friends. And thankfully, we've been meeting for a girls' trip every single year ever since I graduated. So I'm so grateful for that. And I look back, however, Steve, that's because I think when you move around so much, you become a survivor. So I would, rather than go to whatever city my parents lived in, I would call one of my friends and say, hey, I would love to be with you all for New Year's. Can I stay at your house? And you have to really get good at being assertive, asking for what you want, what you need, and keeping in touch with these people when I didn't have a home to stay in, and inviting myself. And your question is so good about an identity shift. I had an identity crisis, but it wasn't until I was a grown up. So I was just so used to doing that. And I went to college, and then I went to Auburn and tried to fit in with all these gorgeous Southern belles. And because that's what I did, I was like, oh, okay, I can do that. Back then, I'm not kidding. They wore bows on their heads when they were in college. So I plopped this bow on my head, I'm like, hey. And then I realized, oh, wow, I am so not Southern. And I'm in the middle of Alabama. Yeah. And I so appreciated that culture very much. But all of a sudden it started catching up with me because I was trying to fit in and trying to pretend, but I wasn't. My parents moved to Birmingham, Alabama at the time. So I could say, oh, I live in Birmingham. And then everybody then assumed I'm from Birmingham, but I don't have a Southern accent and I can't pull off the bow. And so all of a sudden I could tell this disconnect. Yeah. Now, all of a sudden, I go get my PhD at LSU. I fall in love with New Orleans. I fell hard in love with New Orleans. So I move back. I start my job at Loyola, and I look around, and I want to be a great professor. That's what I was hired to do, right? I've got my PhD, and I look around, and ain't nobody looking like me. I was so young. I was female. I was super excited. I don't know if and I cared about fashion, all the things that you look around and you don't really see in academia too much.
Sure.
And so what did I do, Steve? I pretended that wasn't me. And I tried to fit in. And so I had an identity crisis. And the identity crisis was brought on by my dean walking me into his office and saying, Michelle, you are not going to get promoted with these faculty evaluations. They're pretty bad. I was like, I don't understand why they're so bad. I'm doing what everybody around here is doing. And then I figured out, but it wasn't me. So the identity crisis was all of those moves served me really, really well in many different ways. It made me resilient and interested in other people and adaptable, and I could make friends easily until all of a sudden I realized you can't keep fitting in.
It's interesting. You bring up a lot of that I don't think many people would understand. People in the airline industry would get it very well. Of I can drop into any city in the world, and I have, and I can pretty much within a matter of a couple hours, I can figure out the road grid system. I can figure out the town center. I can figure out a lot of things very, very quickly where my hotel is. And it's almost like I've got this ability to have this bird's eye view of the city. And it's just so quick because I'm in and out of a city within a day or two, and then I'm gone. With that being said, also, I have the ability to drop into a city, text message a buddy of mine and go, hey, I'm down the road. I need a place to stay tonight. And they're like, yeah, come on in. No problem. And I've been with other people and they're like, we can't just go and stay there. Like, you haven't even talked to this guy in 5 years. I'm like, he doesn't care. It's like, and it's Christmas and he doesn't care. And it's like, I can be Barcelona, Spain. I can be anywhere. And so a lot of people don't understand that ability that, you just reach out like, hey man, I'm down the road. I got nothing going on. I'm going to drop in and say hi. Sure. Come on in. I got a couch. That's fine by me. And so it's a much different life.
I love that. It takes a lot of courage. It's just what I know though. I
don't even know a different, that is my life. Now, my question to you is, was it hard for you to stop doing that? And the reason I say this is there's a lot of airline pilots, there's a large portion of airline pilots that within 1 to 2 years of retiring, they die because their identity was being an airline pilot. That's all they know. And all of a sudden, when they're not that person, they're sitting at home like, I'm a stranger to my family. I'm a stranger to everything. I've been traveling my whole life. What do I do? And so I'm just curious, you did it obviously at an earlier age where all of a sudden you planted roots. How did you get out of that going, okay, it's been about a year or two. Should probably be punching out here and because your body's used to it, but you're not. How did you overcome that?
You ask really great questions. Yeah. So I was forced to have this identity crisis because I was about to not lose my job, but it was made known to me I would not get tenure if my faculty evaluations were that low. So I had to spend a lot of time thinking, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And I was so scared to be myself. And then when I finally gave myself permission to be myself, then my career took off. And you're right. I think my nervous system was so used to just change that I had to get really comfortable. The good news is I chose New Orleans intentionally because it was so rooted. I mean, the roots are deep here. Right. And I loved it that it wasn't a transient city. I was from DC, born in DC, very transient. Atlanta, I lived there. I didn't want to live in a city where people were coming and going all the time. So my choice of New Orleans was definitely a reaction to having moved around so much. I didn't want that. I wanted a culture that was steeped in tradition. And so New Orleans, if there's one thing that you can do wrong in this city, it's if you're boring. If you're boring, you're dead, right, in New Orleans. And so I feel like this is a city that is always something going on that kind of can keep me interested. And that's why I stayed so long. I'm divorced now, but I did end up marrying a wonderful person who he was a lawyer and I knew he was never, ever going to leave. And he had this huge family in New Orleans. So all of these things were so appealing as a result of my childhood. We didn't work out, but we have a wonderful college kid now at the University of Georgia. And I could have left again after all of that didn't work out, but I love New Orleans and I love roots and I love tradition and I love Mardi Gras and I can hear a band practicing outside of my
going, right? Yeah. It's starting to get rolling. Let me ask you this. Was there any resentment? And this is a harsh word, so I hate using this word, but as a child, we can get emotional with things that we don't have. Was there any resentment to the life that you had that you kind of were like, man, I wish my dad didn't have this job so that I could stay in some city and I don't want to do this. And I just want to stay in one place for one time and be normal. And I hate resentment may be a tough word, but did you go through that?
I just had this conversation this Christmas with my 80-year-old dad.
Really?
In New Orleans. He came for Christmas and I said, we would go on walks every day. And I'd say, can I talk to you about why did you move us why did I have to go to 3 different high schools? Like, Dad, can we just talk about that? Because I don't know anybody who would do that to their kid. I sure as heck wouldn't. And once you become a parent, then you start realizing I would never move my kid 3 different high schools. And we talked about it, and he said, Michelle, I do have regrets, and I'm very sorry. That was a lot. He said, back then, if you told General Motors no, then you got stepped over the next time. It was
Right.
it. And he said the benefits were so good. And he said, I grew up so poor that was my lifeline. And I felt so loyal to this company who believed in me, who hired me when I was 19 years old, going to night school, didn't have the traditional undergraduate degree. And they chose me over hundreds of candidates and then paid for me to finish my degree. He said, I just felt so loyal, and they saw something in me that if they said, we want you to go here, I just said yes. And you're right. I didn't really think about you all and the consequences it would have. So that was a powerful conversation, Steve, that just happened.
Wow.
Now, you ask if I had felt that during the time. No, my dad loves telling the story that the day that I was only in Nashville for 1 year, and I made captain or something of the cheerleading team, and the whole high school had voted on the top cheerleaders, and we always won the championships. And so here I was, pretty new to the high school, and I win, whatever, top cheerleader, and by the student body. My mom was in the audience, standing ovation, yay. And I go home, and my dad said, I'm so sorry, we're moving. And he loves telling this story, which I finally had to tell him, you got to stop telling that story, Dad. He loved telling his friends. And can you believe it? My daughter had just made cheerleading, standing ovation. I tell her that we have to move, and she says, I'm so proud of you, Dad. And I did. And I told him he's got to stop telling that story, because I was programmed.
Sure.
To say, I'm so proud of you, Dad. What else are you going to say?
Right.
I mean, I felt like I couldn't stomp my feet and say, screw you. I just made cheerleading. What are you doing to me? I just wasn't. So again, I ended up having an identity crisis, because I was so programmed just to say, okay, proud of you, Dad. Let's go. Okay, proud of you, Dad. Let's go. And so I didn't know who I was. That's why I kept trying to be, when went to Auburn and trying to be this Southern gal, because I just thought they were gorgeous and so sweet, and I want to be like you. And that doesn't serve you well when you're in your career, and you've got to be you, and you have to know your strengths and what differentiates you. And I had no clue.
So let me ask you this. So let's, who you are today, obviously very successful at Loyola. If you did not choose this path, the path that you're on right now, where do you think you'd be right now? Who would I be talking to?
Yeah, my grandfather had this, I don't understand why, but he chose me to go on a letter writing campaign when I was getting my master's, actually, when I was an undergraduate. You've got to get a graduate degree. You need to get a PhD. He was an author of 2 books. He had a PhD from Georgetown. He taught. He was this brilliant, brilliant guy, and saw something in me. And so literally back then, I would receive monthly letters from my grandfather. You need to keep going. You're smart. Get a PhD. You can have a family too. You need to write books like me. If I had not had that influence, there's no freaking way I would have chosen academia, because still to this day, I just spent time up there. I love Loyola. I love my students. Do I fit in to this day? Nope. Still don't fit in. There's something, I'm just not really like everybody else up there. I'm not a typical academic. I'm writing books that are popular business books. I'm not writing academic articles. I'm going into the classroom saying, come on, we're going on a connection walk. Let's get to know each other's stories. Come on. There aren't professors doing that, right? So I'm definitely different. And I would imagine if I had not had my grandfather persuading me to pursue this, I would have gone into like PR and marketing, because I just have a lot of passion and enthusiasm that maybe would work well in that area.
For a lot of times when people want to be successful, right? And New Year's resolutions, right? And I'm going to preface it with this analogy that people with New Year's resolutions, everyone always tells me, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start working out more. I'm going to be more responsible. I'm going to. My question is always, who or what do you have to let go of to actually be successful? Not what you have to do more of. What do you have to let go of or stop doing? Have you ever thought of, if you had a certain belief, let's say you had a belief about money or a belief about friendships, what did you have to let go of in order to grow to overcome a challenge?
Dang, Steve, you ask really great questions. When I received tenure and I had put my head down, publish or perish, and so I was publishing all these articles, and I lifted my head up and I was like, woo, okay, I now want to do and focus what interests me and what I'm passionate about. And so I then gave up that trying to be this, academic. And I'm like, I want to be an executive coach. So I started coaching executives. I want to be a best-selling author. So I started writing books. I want to start a podcast. So I started the Seismic Shift podcast. So I had to give myself permission once I got tenure at the university to say, okay, did that, but I need to get rid of those things that I kept force fitting, and I need to explore what I'm really and what I'm really good at. And so in the last 10 years, I've been able to take off, and it felt so much better to be aligned with my strengths and what I get excited about. So more of writing books and giving speeches, and the podcast is much more me than crunching numbers and writing academic articles.
Do you think, and I believe this, and I'm curious your perspective, I think a lot of times people are waiting for permission to finally be the person they want to be. And I think
I wanted somebody to tell me, it's okay, Michelle, but nobody's going to tell you that. You got to figure it out yourself.
Yeah. Listen, I'm a big believer. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody's coming to save you. It's, you could tell me, we could talk, and you could tell me your problems, and I'm going to go, man, I'm sorry to hear that. When I walk away, I've got my own shit in life that I got to deal with. I'm going to be like, yeah, she's having a bad day. Suck it up. She's got to figure it out. And I think a lot of times we're waiting for someone to tell us it's okay. You're going to be like, it's okay to fail. And you want, a lot of times I think people want permission. I'm just curious, you being bringing the next generation to the forefront, do you see that, or what are you seeing of the next generation that's coming? Are they accountable, responsible, above the line? Where are they?
Yeah. So I'm teaching Gen Z right now, and Gen Z is getting a lot of flack, right? People are like, they don't want to work hard, and those Gen Zers, right? And I heard the best quote by one of my role models, Brene Brown. And she was giving a speech to all these Gen Xers, and I'm a Gen Xer. And like I said, I've got a kid in college. So I'm teaching the same age as my kid in college. And Brene Brown looks out at the crowd, and she's like, I'm so tired of you all dissing Gen Z, because guess what? You raised them.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
And they're reacting to us. So I love my daughter. She's fantastic. She does not want to be me. She doesn't want to work as hard as me. And so I don't think it's that Gen Zers don't want to work hard. I think they're reacting to what they saw, and they're like, ooh, woo. I don't want my life to be like that, right? She's always telling me, you work too hard. You work all the time. Don't you have, balance? I want balance in my life. I actually don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of times as we're growing, we're going through seasons, right? I believe that our life is like a book, and books are made of chapters. Chapters begin and chapters end. And I'm sure maybe not you because you've gone to so many high schools, but we all have friends that still live in high school. You talk to them, and all they talk about are the younger days. They've never closed that chapter. And I'm like, bro, we're like 50 now. It's time to be an adult. And they're wearing the Letterman jackets from high school, and they're going to the high school games, and you're like, and they're remember in high school, and I'm just like, they've just never closed that. Or I don't understand. Is it that they don't want to deal with reality of the new chapter? And again, I think that is the issue with people like you and I in our age, as opposed, now we could poke fingers and throw stones at the Gen Zs, but we have our own challenges of self-identity. I think that don't look at me, let's look at them. And I get to interview and talk to a lot of people, and I'm like, you're really not any better than what I'm talking to when I see these kids. Because listen, I think that there's a lot of Gen Zers that are great kids that that have had the proper upbringing or just have that in their DNA, we'll say, to be a better version of themselves. And I think that what you're doing is awesome. I think that helping them and being that beacon is amazing. Because, if you give up on them, what does that say about you? Like, what my question to people is like, well, what else do you give up on in life? You didn't just start that today. You've probably been giving up on a lot of things. And this is just another thing for you to give up on, meaning people. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox here.
I love that.
Let me ask you, the version of you today, what do you get up and fight for? What is your reason, your drive?
Yeah. So I had this seismic shift moment when I realized that the reason why I wasn't effective in the classroom in my early years is because I was not connected with myself at all. Right. And so the only way you can be really good at connecting with others is if you know who you are, you own your story, right? You give up perfection, you give up trying to fit in, you give up people pleasing, you figure out what your strengths are and you lean in with those strengths. So it took me a while. And once I figured that out, then I was good. And then when I lifted my head up from getting tenure, I was like, okay, I want to help. I want to help others. Cause I thought, oh, maybe it was just me. No, everybody out there, Steve, is having some sort of disconnection, right? They're all trying to be somebody they're not. They're trying to be a jerk boss because they think that's effective because their little league coach was, whatever. They're trying to be somebody they're not. So then I started helping all these people and realizing there was disconnection everywhere. So I wrote my first book, The Seismic Shift in Leadership, which is all about we have got to get rid of this jerk boss mentality and we have to lean in with connection more. And then all of a sudden, Dr. Vivek Murthy, who was our U.S. Surgeon General under President Biden, he comes out and his platform when he was Surgeon General was disconnection and loneliness. He's like, okay, not only is it a negative thing, it is killing us. Disconnection, isolation, loneliness is causing a 60% increase in premature deaths. Wow. So now we have this health crisis. So I identified connection is this is the next shift when it comes to leadership. And now we have this health crisis. And then the pandemic comes. And now 5 years after the pandemic, we have this hybrid work world and people are withering on the vines. People aren't going out as much. They don't have as much interaction. And so I wrote my latest book, The Seismic Shift in You, and giving people the shifts that I believe are necessary to lean in with more connection so that we are healthier at the end of the day. What we're realizing is that a day full of 10 Zoom calls is not fulfilling at all. And it's not attracting the top talent. It's not retaining the top talent. It's not keeping them engaged. So I'm advocating we've got to switch up how we're leading and how we're interacting with others in the workplace. And we have to lean in with more connection. So that's what gets me up every day because I know all of the research. I feel we're going down a dark path. I show up in my classes. People used to talk. I show up to the cafeteria. There used to be lots of chatter. People are just on their phones all the time. And this is not connection. And this is ending up causing anxiety, right? And loneliness and depression. And so that's what gets me up every day. We have to do things differently.
So let's talk about your book. You've got a new book coming out, and you've written several. Tell me, we talked about being a connector. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so this just came out with my mentor, Marshall Goldsmith. So I took a year sabbatical.
I know Marshall.
Oh, great. Oh, that's great. I took a year sabbatical from Loyola to write this book with him. And how it started is we were at the Thinkers 50 Awards in London in 2023. And Marshall had written the foreword to my first book. So he's been my mentor since 2020. So it's 2023. We're in London. We're listening to all the top thinkers in the world. Amy Edmondson, psychological safety from Harvard, Ruth Gotian, Dory Clark, Kirsten Ferguson. And we're realizing that the seismic shift they're all talking about is AI. And they're biggest recommendation, every single one of them was like, okay, if we're going to compete with our addiction to technology, AI and automation, we have to lean in with more heart and humanity. And I said, okay, Marshall. I said, so my first book identified that we have to shift towards connection. I said, we need to write a book that gives people the exact what they need to do to compete with this world of technology and how they lean in with heart and humanity. So that we wrote, so I said, will you be my co-author? And we wrote The Seismic Shift in You, and it gives you 7 shifts. You have, for example, number 1, we have to shift from what to who. We've got to make this a more meaningful life. And how do you do that? You shift to the who. And then what I'm seeing is these people who were on these 10 Zooms a day, they're ending up so empty at night. They're depleted and they're focusing on the wrong things because they're not putting themselves first. So I love it that right before this podcast episode, you're drinking a protein shake. I love that because you realize, wow, man, I missed lunch. I gotta fuel myself. So many leaders these days are putting themselves last. They are not eating. They're not getting up for bio breaks. They're not exercising, and they're just, task. And at the end of the day, they're empty. So we've got the most important who is you. So as leaders, we have to put ourselves first. And then we've got to shift our calendars because our calendars are nuts. They're not prioritizing connection. They're prioritizing transaction. So I take you through the shifts, and they're micro shifts, but I honestly believe that it yields macro results. So my mantra is connection drives results.
And I think that at the end of the day, when you're talking about calendars, I believe calendars and phones and emails, these are all reactionary tools. There's nothing proactive. It dings, we're like, it buzzes, it whistles, it's, in our calendars. And I believe the other way. I believe we should be proactive in our day. I do live with my calendar for adherence because I've got a lot of people that I coach and speaking events and stuff. If it's on my calendar, it happens. If it's not on my calendar, it doesn't happen. It's very simple. And that's just how I live. And if somebody says, hey, can I have a meeting with you? Absolutely. Here's a link. Find a time on my calendar and we can meet. Do you have a minute? I really don't. And it's not that I remember one time I had the opportunity to speak with a very successful, influential person. If I said his name, everybody would know. And I thought, okay, we're probably going to get the whole day together. We're going to be playing volleyball on the beach. This is going to be amazing. And the time kept compressing that I was going to get with him. And it was like down to an hour that I was going to have. By the time I actually talked to him and shook his hand, he says, Steve, nice to meet you. You've got 12 minutes. And I'm like, I thought we had an hour. He said, listen, no offense, but if I can answer your question in 3 minutes, we're done in 3.
Whoa.
I said, okay, kind of what you just did. I was like, oh, okay. He said, listen, it's nothing against you, Steve. But he said, here's the thing. If I'm giving you an extra 57 minutes when I just solved the problem and had the outcome that you wanted in 3, there's other people that I'm not helping. And that's selfish of me not giving them what they want. So he says, I'm not doing this to be rude. I'm doing this for opportunity cost. And he said, whenever you have a meeting with someone, Steve, this is my advice. Always sit down and say, what is the outcome of this meeting we want? And if you can solve it in 3 minutes, the meeting's done, and walk away.
I love that.
He said, why would you have a 1-hour Zoom call when everything, you're just kind of sitting around staring at each other, like looking at the clock? He said, be done. He said, the one thing that we have to protect, the non-renewable asset that we have is time. Why would you waste? We tend to waste what we value the least, time or money. Most of us will waste our time and hoard our money. When they reprint more money, but they do not add 25 hours in the day. They don't give a 25th hour. So that I never forgot that. And that was probably 15 years ago. And I always remember.
Great. That's great advice.
Yeah. So I always ask, what's the outcome of the conversation? Like, how do we know this conversation was a win? They say, well, I want to get this, this, and this. Okay. Now we know the goal and the solution that we're heading towards. Perfect. How do we get there now?
Yeah, people hate meetings,
yeah.
despise meetings.
Yeah. And normally you get nothing done. And I remember one of my mentors told me, he said, Steve, he said, you don't have problems. You just have solutions you haven't figured out yet. He said, every time that you're looking at something, he goes, you have a 6-hour solution, but you've been dicking around with this thing for 6 months and you haven't solved the problem because you're looking at it as a problem. So all you're finding is more problems.
Oh my goodness.
He said, start looking at solutions. He goes, you guys don't have problems. You have a 6-hour solution you haven't figured out yet. Never forgot that one either.
God, that's good. Oh, you're full of good.
You can steal those. Yeah, those are yours, Michelle. Take them to Loyola.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes. So, okay. So you've got the book. When does the book come out? Is it out? And how do
it just came out in December and it made top new release on Amazon, which is super exciting and #1 in its categories. So I've been on my media tour and I got to be on NBC Nightly News and morning shows. So it's really super exciting. I think that, and it's not about me, it's about the message that we need to do better and lean in more with connection is timely and it's important. And so I do feel this urgency. The more we can get in front of people and convince them we've got to do things differently, or else we're all going to end up lonely, isolated, and depressed. Nobody wants that. Let's lean in with connection. So thank you for demonstrating on this podcast what I'm advocating with connection.
Listen, I believe that, the more hands you shake, the more money you make. And when I say money, I don't mean it has to be a remuneration or monetary. We are rewarded many, many ways, right? I believe this conversation, we never know where a conversation goes. Like I said, I've been sitting in bars in Australia, Beijing, China. You just sit down and start talking to someone and next thing you know, you're talking, you've got a lot in common. Had I never had that conversation, I would have walked right past that person and would have never known. Yeah. And I've just learned that sometimes if we slow down, we can speed up in life. And sitting down and sitting in a conversation with people and being interested as opposed to interesting is all the difference. And if you and I met, we would maybe not know our backgrounds. You would probably not think that I was an international airline pilot. I wouldn't think that you were a professor at Loyola. We wouldn't know each other. If we were standing in line at the movies, we wouldn't know that. How many people do we walk by, talk to, and we never even take the time to stop and go, tell me about yourself. What do you do? I mean, now you're probably the weird guy if you say that, or the weird girl if you sitting at a bar, like, tell me about yourself. That's now you're the odd man out. Like you said, when you go in the cafeteria, if you start talking, you'd probably get in trouble for being too loud. A complete opposite of how it was when we were younger, where if you were the one in the corner doing something, you were the weird one because you were the quiet one in a crowded room.
Correct. And one of the cool mic drop moments you just said, it's a great way to wrap up the episode, is try to be the most interested.
Yeah.
Rather than to be the most interesting person. I love that.
So 2 final questions I have for you. If we're talking to the person that's watching or listening to this show, and maybe they're stuck in survival mode, what truth do they need to hear from you?
Yeah. So to get out of survival mode, which is typically transactional mode, and we need to go deeper with connection, is first of all, get out of the frickin' house, right? Go to the coffee shop, have conversations, and start asking deeper questions. So if you're in charge of leading a meeting, begin the meeting with going around and saying, I want to know, how are y'all doing? It's a Friday. How you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? Let's go around. Ask them how they're doing. Ask them how they're feeling. Ask them to share their stories. We need to go deeper with connection, and that's what builds trust. Then people will take risks, and then that improves innovation, which leads to productivity, which leads to financial performance. So connection is your power skill.
I love that. Final question. If you could sit down, whether the person is dead or alive, and you could have a whiskey, a beer, a drink, a coffee, whatever your choice is, who would you talk to?
Oh my goodness. Who would I talk to? I would want to pick Jack Welch's brain and what he
Really?
built with GE because he was so revered for so long and what a badass, right? And then it comes to find out that he might have been kind of jerk bossy. And some of the systems that he built were not what I'm about, which is creating connection. They were really creating fear.
Yeah.
So I'd like to have a conversation with him to understand where his mind was and what he built. Because I've already had a conversation with my other hero, Alan Mulally, who turned around Ford Motor
Yep.
Company,
And
and
Boeing.
he and Boeing. Well said. Yes, and Boeing. And I've had a conversation with him, and how he led is exactly what I'm advocating. He even used the terminology love. He would say, "Love them up, love them up." Come on, love them up. Nobody used the word love in the 80s when they were turning around a company that might go bankrupt. So Alan Mulally, I've been fortunate to have the conversation. I'd like to sit down with Jack Welch.
I love it. I love it. Dr. MichelleJohnston, how do they find you if they want to look up and find your book?
I would love to hear from you. Yeah, I'd love to hear from you. MichelleJohnston.com is my website. My book's available at your local bookstores or Barnes & Noble or Amazon, and check it out. And please, please make 2026 the year of connection.
I love it. It was great talking to Michelle. Thank you for your time. For everyone listening and watching, make sure you go out, look her up, follow her on social media, get her book. Obviously, there's a reason that she's where she's at. And, I think the people factor is something that is huge and is going to be a huge game changer for the people that embrace it. So on behalf of Michelle and myself, thank you for another episode of High Stakes with Steve Rozenberg. And we will catch you guys next week with another amazing guest. See you guys.